Welcome to Theory Lesson 2. This lesson is on the formation of chords and how chords are built. Most church musicians, guitarists, and keyboard players are used to playing chords, either from a lead sheet, which has the melody line plus chord designations, or maybe even from a page that has nothing but lyrics with chord designations above them. Such chord designations could be C, C over G, C over E, G, D7, A7, and so on. Most musicians know what I'm talking about. But if you don't have a knowledge of music theory, a musician has no idea how these chords fit into the key he is playing in, if he even knows what key he's playing in. This lesson will explain chord construction within the confines of the key or language of the piece of music. It is important that you understand intervals, which were explained in the previous lesson. Intervals are the building blocks of chords. If you don't understand intervals, please go back and review the previous lesson. So, what is a chord? A chord is a set of notes played together. Two or more, but most chords consist of three or more notes played together. Three notes played together is called a triad. Triads. They are formed in specific intervals, usually thirds. Each key has at least 7 basic chords plus many variations of those chords. We discussed the 7 different tones of the major scale using the C scale as our standard, and we're going to continue using the C scale as our standard. What you're going to find out in this lesson is every chord has at least 2 different names or designations. Most of you are familiar with the standard notation that you have on your music or your lead sheets, and that is the marking with the name of the chord based on the key of the scale, such as an E major chord, which is E right here, or E minor. Okay, you're used to that. But what you're not used to or may not understand is that chords, for theory purposes, are not just designated by the name of the key they're built on. They're designated by numbers, specifically Roman numerals, the large upper Roman numeral and the small lowercase Roman numeral. And that's the thing we're going to be discussing a lot of learning about, and that's what we're going to be using from here on out in theory. So you really need to understand this. So, going to the C scale, once again, we can build a scale on each note of that scale, or as the root for a chord. For instance, we'll start on the C of the C. Once again, the C scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay, we're going to start and build a chord in thirds on the C. 1, 3, the third, interval of a third, and the interval of a fifth. We talked about those intervals last time. The 1, the 3, and the 5. So when I say to you 1, 3, and 5, I'm talking about intervals. An interval of a third, interval of a fifth, and they're counted from the base of the chord. Okay, so we have a C chord built on the 1. We have a D minor chord, E minor chord, F chord, G chord, A minor chord, B diminished chord. Those are the chords that can be built in the key of C. We take each note of the scale and we create a chord building it in thirds, 1, 3, 5. And that would be, remember, there's no flats or sharps in C. 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. Now, we could name these chords by the name of the note that they start on. However, for music theory purposes, we're going to start using the Roman numeral system. So the C chord built on the C is also, the C is the one of the scale. Remember, there's 7 notes in the scale, 7 different notes. So this is the 1 chord in the key of C. This is the 2 chord in the key of C, Roman numeral 2, the minor chord. 3 chord, 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 chord, the 7 chord, and back to the 1 chord. Now, what does that look like? Okay, can you see this board showing you the designation of those chords built in triads, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You may not be able to see the difference in the designations, but your major chords are marked with uppercase Roman numerals, and your minor chords are marked with lowercase Roman numerals. And for right now, don't worry about whether you know the chord is major or minor. We'll talk about that. But just to show you that chords are formed in thirds, okay? Now, you can use this method to play the numbered chords in any key using the designated sharps or flats of the key you are in. Every key has the designated 1 through 7, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 chords in every key. They are based on that note of the scale that they're formed on. So if they're formed on the 1 of the scale, say here's the key of E flat. Okay, so if it's a 1 chord in the key of E flat, there's the 1 chord. Here's the 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, 6 chord, 7 chord, back to the 1 chord. Now, every song, whatever key you're in, can be harmonized by using one of these 7 chords. The most common chords in every key, or in each key, are the 1, 4, 5, 6, and often the 2. So I'll demonstrate those. The 1, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 2 if you're using that, and the 1. Now, every song that's out there can be harmonized using one or more of these chords. They may not be the chords you're used to hearing in a given song, but they can be harmonized. For instance, one of the common riffs back from the 60s, and I was brought up in the 60s, graduated from high school in 65. We used to sit at the piano in chorus, or different people would sit at the piano in chorus, and they would play Heart and Soul and some other things. And of course, that was the era of rock and roll, and we just thought, oh, that was really awesome. But what people didn't realize is that the most common harmonies of the rock songs were a combination of possibly 4 chords, 1, 6, 4, 5, and 1. And you would have that riff under many pieces of music, and it was all the same. So you had 1, you had 6, 4, 5, 1. It went something like this: 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, 6, 4, 5. Okay, those were the common chords. And so 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, 1, 6, 4, 5, 1, that sequence, you can translate that sequence to any other key. So that's why it's important that you learn the numbers of these chords, because the same sequence is in every key. So now, some chords are more important than other chords, and we're going to get to that in a minute and talk about which chords are the ones that you're going to hear the most. But in the meantime, if you're a keyboard player, there's something else you need to know about chords, and that is inversions. I don't know about guitar players. If you do much in inversions, you might do something depending on what you're doing. But I'm going to put up this new chart here, which shows chord inversions. Now, what is an inversion? Let's go back to math. When you were learning fractions, probably in 6th grade, one of the things they would tell you, when you would divide by a fraction, the first thing you had to do was invert the fraction and multiply the two factors. Now, what does that mean? Okay, invert means you turn it upside down. So say you had the fraction 3/4. So if you're going to invert it before you follow through on the next operation in math, 3/4 becomes 4/3, 4/3. So all you did was take the bottom number and put it on top. And that's exactly what you're going to do with a chord inversion. So for instance, let's start with the C chord in the key of C, the one chord which is built on the C. And that chord is C, E, G, as is shown here on my chart. Okay? First inversion. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take the C that's on the bottom and we're going to move it to the top. So what we're going to have now is E, G, and the C is still there, but it's now up here. We moved it. That's called the first inversion. And all you did was take the tonic, which is what that first note of the chord is called, and you moved it to the top of the chord. Now the second inversion, you're going to start from the first inversion. You're going to take that E that's on the bottom right here, and you're going to move it to the top. So now you're going to have the G, or the fifth of the chord, in the root. Remember, this is 1, 3, 5. So you have 5, 1, 3. Same chord, but it's in an inversion. You're saying, well, why does that matter? Same chord, all the same notes are there. If you are a keyboard player, this is why it matters. One of the things that you try to do as a keyboard player is keep your playing as smooth as possible and not so choppy. And one of the ways you're choppy is if you jump around. If all you're doing is playing all your chords in root position, then you're going to have a root position means 1, 3, 5, rather than first inversion or second inversion. Then this is what you're going to have. Say I'm looking at a piece of music and I see we have a C chord, followed by an F chord, followed by a G chord, followed by a D chord. So here's what we're going to have. I have a C chord, followed by a G chord, then I have an F chord, then I have a D chord. That was 1, 4, 5, 1. That was the sequence. 1, 4, 5, 1. The 1 chord, followed by the 4 chord, which is built on the 4 of the scale, followed by the 5 chord, built on the 5 of the scale. So we had the 1 chord, then the 4 chord, then the 5 chord, and back to the 1 chord. Now, the object in playing to be smooth is to keep your hands as close to being in one position as possible. So the way you do that is by playing the chords in inversions. So here's 1, here's 4, 5, 1. And notice my hand position's right here. 1, 4, 5, 1. I'm in root position. 1, 4, 5. I'm in an inversion of the D. So 1, 4, 5, 1, 1, 4, 5, as opposed to 1, 4, 5, 1. It's 1, 4, 5, 1. Okay? So you need to learn the inversions. Now, once again, I wrote them out here. I wrote down the inversions of the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. My suggestion is if you have music paper, and if you're not familiar with playing in inversions of chords, I suggest you get music paper, and you can punch that and put it in your notebook, and that you write out the inversions of the chord, the 1, 4, 5 in every key, and then practice playing in those inversions and see what a difference that makes with your fingering where you're placing your hands on the keyboard. It makes a big difference in the smoothness, I said, of your playing. Okay, now these chords have names. Besides, I know you really don't need any more names, you're confused with names. Besides the fact that this is a G chord, it's also the 5 chord in the key of C. And this is an F chord, it's also the 4 chord in the key of C. And this is the C chord, it's the 1 or the tonic chord in the key of C. But the 3 major chords that you can harmonize any song with happen to be the 1, 4, 5, and 1. They have other names. This one's called the tonic, also the 1. This one's called the subdominant, and this one's called the dominant. Now, dominant, why? It's 5 notes above the tonic. Here's the tonic, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's built on the 5 of the scale. It's the dominant chord in the key. Subdominant is the 4 because it's 5 notes below the C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and built there. So your 4 chord is your subdominant, your 5 chord is your dominant, and your 1 chord is your tonic. Now, you can establish the sound of any key by the 5, 7, 1, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, 1. When you hear those chords, it establishes the sequence or the sound of that key in your head. It's important to know this, and it's important for you to know the 1, 4, and 5 of every key that you're going to be playing in. That's why I'm telling you, either sit down and do a thing like I did here and write them out with the inversions, or get a piece of notebook paper, make yourself a chart, and write down, okay, key of C, 1 chord, C, 4 chord, the F. And if you don't know what the notes in those chords are, if you don't know that the C chord is a C, E, G, then write that down on your notes. If you don't know that the F chord is F, A, C, write that down on your notes too. But write this out. Once again, this is a great exercise because if you do this, in the process of doing this, you will learn those chords. You will automatically go there. And then you need to do that in every key. So if you're in the key of E flat, 3 flats. 1, 4, 5, 1. Okay. G, 4, 5, 1. B flat. 1, 4, 5, 1. Okay. You need to learn those chords in every key. The 1, 4, 5, 1. 1, 4, 5, 1. Get that concept down. The subdominant and the dominant and the tonic are used in what's called a cadence. And a cadence is a group of notes and chords that usually end a piece. And sometimes it's the amen cadence. So it could be 1, 4, 1. 4, 1. Or it could be amen. 1, 4, 5, 1. Or it could just be 4. Amen. Okay? So learn the 1, 4, and 5 in every inversion. Write them out. Same group of chords in every key. Now, why is it helpful to know, excuse me, that chords are formed in thirds? Okay? One of the things that happens in many charismatic services is that there'll be a space between songs. And what people will want to do is just worship and just carry worship like in a singing, something like chanting, but not quite chanting. We call it singing in the spirit. We might have other names for it. And it might be just on one note. You might just want to sing holy, holy, holy is the Lord. Now, if you know you're the keyboard player, and the reason this is important, let me explain this, is that years ago, when I first started playing in church, I couldn't play anything unless I had notes in front of me. So if they started a chorus, they wanted to do something else, I just sat there with my hands in my lap because I didn't know where to go. The thing about chords, once you learn that chords are built in thirds, the thing you're going to find is that any note on the scale can be a part of more than one chord. And let me show you that. I'm going to demonstrate. For instance, let's take the note G. Okay, now we already know it's the fifth in the C chord. C, E, 1, 3, 1, the third, and the fifth. But it can also be the 1 in the G chord, which is 1, 3, 5. It can also be the 3 in the E flat chord. So let me just give you an example. If you know, for instance, that chords are built in thirds, one of the exercises you can do at your piano is sit down or at the keyboard, pick a note, any note on the scale. Now, build chords around it in thirds, up, down, any direction. It can be the 1, it can be the 3, it can be the minor third, it can be the 5th. It can be any part of the chord. So how would that sound? Okay, let's say on the G. Okay, we didn't change the top note. All we did was change the chord progressions under it. And this is one of the ways, if you were a keyboard player and they want to just sing on a note and they just want to worship, that you can do this. Holy, 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 holy Lord, holy Lord. Okay, I'm just giving you an example. Once you learn how powerful chords are and what they can add to your playing, maybe you'll get encouraged to get out there and just work on understanding and developing chords. Everything built on 1, 3, 5, the scale. Practice the concept in many, many keys, because we're naming the chords now, not just by the note they're built on. We're naming them in the degree of the scale that they're built on. So when I just showed you with a G, what could happen with a G, here it's part of the C major chord, which is the 1 chord in the key of C. And then when we got to here it's the 3rd. It's part of the E minor chord. So now you might have seen an E minor chord before, but this is built here. Okay, here it's the 7th, the 9th. 1, 3, 5, 7. It's the 9th and an F chord. Here it's the base of the G. It's G. Here it's the 3rd of the E flat chord. Here it's the 5th of the C minor chord. Here it's the 1 of the G minor chord. And then here, once again, it's the 5 of the C chord. So all I'm showing you is that chords have power to totally transform the way a song sounds. And this is the basis, too, of learning to play by ear. Okay? So now, first lesson in playing by ear, I wasn't going to go into that today, but I'm just going to give you an exercise for you to try. First of all, I want you to sit down and figure out the 1, 4, 5 chord of every key. And if you're really challenged and you can't do it in every key, at least figure it out in the key of C and maybe the key of F and the key of G. Okay? And I want you, if you've never played by ear, I want you to sit down and we're going to start learning to play by ear. First thing you're going to do is pick a song. And I'm going to pick one for you because this is a simple song that everybody knows. This is Jesus Loves Me. And we're going to do it in the key of C. So there's no sharps and there's no flats. You don't have to worry about all the black notes. So first thing you're going to do is play the scale. Okay. Now you've got to find where the song is going to start. Give you a hint. Most songs, in whatever key they're in, start on one of the notes, excuse me, of the one chord. So we know the one chord in C is C, E, and G. So Jesus Loves Me is going to start either on a C, an E, or a G, because that's what's normal. So now you just have to hear where it's going to be. I'll just give you a hint for this to start out. It starts on G. Okay, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to sit down. You're going to pick out the melody of Jesus Loves Me. Just keep picking it out till you find the right notes. Okay. Okay, and follow through the end. Once you've figured it out and you sit down and you can just play the melody with one finger, that's all you have to do. Okay. Once you've got the melody down where you can pretty well get through it without too many horrible errors. Okay. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to figure out from your chord chart or from your knowledge of chords that the three main chords in the key of C are the 1, the 4, and the 5. So the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 1 chord. Of course, I was playing them in root position. I wasn't playing them in inversions. Okay, so now, since we said earlier that every song can be harmonized with one of those 3 chords. Now, granted, it may not be the chord you're used to hearing, but it still will work. So once again, now what you're going to do is you're going to sit down, you're going to play your melody with one finger, and with your other hand, down here in the bass, because it doesn't matter where you play your chords, but play them down here in the bass, because that way you can keep your one finger going. Okay. Harmonize underneath the melody line that you just created and try each chord. Try the 1, or try the 4, or try the 5. Okay, you'll hear what you're doing in playing by ear is you're training your ear to listen for harmonies. And so try going through that whole song and fitting one of those 3 chords underneath the melody line as you're playing. Now, the minute you change, now you know that clashes. So obviously that designates, oh, it's time, I think I better change a chord there. So go back and forth accordingly. Work your way through it. Try another song, a song that you like, that you want to learn. Do the same thing. Try it and see, figure out where it starts. Try it till you get, the whole melody line picked out with your hand, and then try one of the 3 chords underneath it. Because most of ear training, many people can harmonize by ear and they can hear things in their head. They just don't know how to find them on the keyboard, and they don't know how it all fits together. And that's what we're working on right now, how it all fits together. And I'm showing you that, and we're going to keep adding chords, and we're going to keep working on chords until you understand it. But it's important that you work on the concepts, because unless you work on the concepts and unless you practice, it will not be automatic. So that's the lesson for today for the introduction to chords. Practice, work on the concepts, leave comments. If you have questions, feel free to ask them, and I will try to answer them in the next lesson. Anyway, have a great and wonderful day. God bless.